Thank you for joining us today, everyone. We are going to just give a couple more minutes for people to join the presentation. While we're waiting to get started, though, we are going to put up a question for all of you, which will just help our presenter to better understand some of what you're dealing with right now. Great. Looks like we're pretty evenly split on who has had experience with the EDA. All right, thank you everyone for answering our questions. While we continue to have some of those pop up, I want to welcome you to our webinar and talk about some housekeeping issues today. My name is Bethany Quinn. I am the Vice President of Strategy and Content Development for Golden Shovel Agency. And I am incredibly pleased to bring to you today someone who is not only an expert in what it takes to get grants written and approved, but also has insider knowledge, which I find so incredibly valuable in knowing how the EDA works. And obviously that insider knowledge is being shared with you. So Renee Wott, Vice President of Economic Development at GrantWorks, will be speaking to you momentarily. But before she does, just housekeeping, we're gonna have everyone on mute today. So if you have a question or a comment, please put it in the chat. Renee, I know has plans to do a robust Q&A session at the end, so everyone's questions will be answered. And with that, thank you for attending. Off to you, Renee.
Thanks so much, Bethany. Like Bethany said, I'm Renee Wott. I'm the VP of Economic Development here at GrantWorks. Sorry, I have two screens today, so if you catch me looking over a bit, just know I have two screens and I'm not looking over at the wall. But at GrantWorks, I head up our economic development department. And for those who don't know, GrantWorks is a full service grant administration firm, specializing in economic development, community development block grants, broadband, environmental, Davis-Bacon, all the fun federal requirements. So as Bethany said, I am actually a former EDA employee. From the polling, it looks like most of y'all are familiar with EDA, on some level, whether you've worked with EDA before, have had partnerships with them, so on and so forth. I actually worked with the Chicago regional office. I'm based in Chicago. So some people on this call might have had me as a project officer. So if you did, good to see you again. And I'm just going to kind of go through, EDA funding and, how to get that funding and some tips and tricks. So today we'll kind of look at the agenda, what is EDA funding for those who, have that very limited knowledge, the grants overview, eligibility, economic development strategies, and how GrantWorks can help. So EDA recently announced in March that there's new fiscal year 2023 funding, and I put up some amounts that the EDA was appropriated for each of their programs. So I'll kind of walk through a bit further in the presentation of what these programs are and what they can do. And something kind of unique about EDA is there's no hard date deadline. When the funds are out, the funds are out. So we always like to encourage folks to, if you do have an application, the sooner you get it in, the sooner it gets reviewed and hopefully approved. So just to note that you're not looking for a specific end date for applications to close, that they could run out the day after the notice of funding drops. It could take the entire year. So just an interesting thing to note there. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of funding out there for FY23. So we want to help y'all take advantage of that funding. I just want to kind of cover the basis of who's eligible for EDA funding. Special district governments like counties of or councils of governments, regional planning commissions, counties, cities, states, tribal governments, nonprofits. The typical federal eligible entities. And just as an overview, the EDA projects should really demonstrate the economic need for the proposed activity through job creation, retention, diversification of economy, and private investment. Those are the two things I like to tell folks to take a look at when they're looking at their projects to be funded for EDA, is really job creation and retention and that private investment. So as you think of the typical projects of an industrial park or expansion of utilities, things of that nature. But we'll kind of go into a bit more of some different projects that's been funded. And then things to know about this new funding is EDA is not accepting applications through grants.gov anymore. That their notice of funding has a new grant portal called the Edge, and you have to register for an account. So I would encourage everyone to do that as soon as possible, even if you're not planning on applying for a grant this year. It's always good to have a username and password so you can get onto that grant portal, and usually they put some tips and tricks on there as well, how to fill out forms and that nature. So I also have a map here of each regional office and how they're how the states are spread out. And as you can see, there's different hues of blue that cover the various offices. So when I worked in Chicago, we oversaw Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. I actually worked a lot with the economic development district. So that's how I'm connected here. I'm originally from Ohio, so I had a lot of connections in Ohio. So as you can see, this is who you would contact if you have a question, a specific question for EDA, is you would contact your regional office, and each state has their own economic development representative. And I can share these slides after the presentation because I have put some embedded links into the slides. So, if you click on the economic development representative, it'll take you to a contact list of every single state, and you just click on your state and it'll spit out exactly who is, the EDA representative for your region. So like Texas, for example, they have multiple economic development representatives. So they may have a West Texas and an East Texas. So that kind of helps you, narrow down who your economic development representative is. And some states, some economic development representatives have multiple states. So two may have the same contact. We're also going to look at determining grant rate eligibility. So again, I did kind of go over, who is eligible for EDA funding. That's not it, right? It's not like any city can apply for EDA funding. You have to be eligible based on distress criteria, and we'll get through that a bit in a few slides. And then match funding. Cash is best, cash match is best, but EDA does allow in-kind matching as well. So, that's just something to keep in mind, is if you have some, dedicated office space that you can use for in-kind matching, that would be allowed. So there's also two big buckets of project types in EDA funding. You have construction projects and non-construction projects. Construction is, any project that leads to a physical outcome, either through creation, revitalization, or acquisition of equipment. So again, you're thinking, anything you need to build, right? Or large acquisition of equipment. Maybe you need to purchase a large machinery and needs to knock down a wall to get that machinery in there. That would be a construction project. And then non-construction projects that are, any projects that don't include physical infrastructure. So creating a plan, hiring an economic development coordinator or a recovery coordinator, and those would not have environmental or engineering components. And then there's like a few buckets of funding, like I talked about a bit before. You have your local technical assistance, that would be a non-construction funding. It's really to help fill those informational gaps in economic development, whether it's at a city department or an economic development corporation or regional planning commission. These are usually smaller awards, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Public works are those big constructions, so you can see anywhere from under $1 million to usually cap is about $5 billion. And then planning that supports the economic development district. So the EDDs get some planning funding to continue with their 5-year comprehensive economic development strategy. Revolving loan funds supply small businesses and entrepreneurs with the gap financing needed to start or expand those businesses. And a revolving loan fund project would be an entity, looking to administer that loan fund. And then RNTA comes out of the headquarters, the EDA headquarters in DC, and those usually fund like larger research and evaluation, national technical projects such as, IEDC, International Economic Development Council. They receive some research funding. I'm sure everyone's seen that if you follow EDA on social media, as well as universities sometimes get the RNTA funding. Universities are also eligible for university center funding. That's competitive, and that's only set aside for universities as well. So looking at grant eligibility, how do we really know the stress of a location or a community? Well, EDA has this really helpful tool called Stats America. It was actually a project funded by EDA, and I've linked it here in the presentation, and it you'll see a few screenshots on the next slide, but it lets you look at the county level data of your county and see if you're eligible on county level data. And sometimes if you're not eligible on a county level, if you have a project location, say it is a construction project, and you're looking to build an industrial park in X census tract data, if you have that 911 address and can find the census tract, and there's actually a tab in Stats America that you can find distress level by census tract as well. So that sometimes helps areas that are a bit more distressed, but their county isn't as a whole. And then this is pulled from EDA's NOFO to really determine what your allowable investment rate is. So this box here is the federal share. So EDA does not go lower than 50. So you could do a 50-50 match. It's pretty standard. And then the most distressed would be an 80% federal, 20% local match. So very rare EDA offers the 100% funding in circumstances like ARPA funds or COVID. There was some 100% no match required, but now into FY23 there is a match required. So kind of back to the pre-COVID investments here. If your county or census tract is eligible for a 60% federal funding and you have the funding to put up a 50-50 match, that does show a bit of extra support that you can put out, financially, and EDA looks favorably upon that as well. So this grant eligibility data, so these are some screenshots from Stats America. Like I said, here's the county level tool. You just type right in what your county is and it will pop up a little chart here at the bottom. I used the county that I grew up in, and what you're really looking for is the 24-month unemployment and the 5-year per capita monetary income PCMI data. So looking at your county based on in comparison to the US data, you want to see what that threshold calculation is. And then you can match it up to the previous slide here of the investment rate. So for example, the 24-month employment is not higher in this county than the US average. So let's see if for the 50% rate, it would have to be 1 percentage point higher than the national average to be qualified for distress. And as we can see, it is actually lower, so it would not be qualified on the 24-month unemployment. And then we look at the 5-year PCMI data. As we can see, it's 95.8% of the national average. Going back, it would also not be eligible for the PCMI data because it's not more than 80%. So to give an overview, this county would not be eligible for EDA data unless there's a documented special need, such as outmigration or severe population loss, a military base closure, or a negative trade pattern. So something you may see is a coal plant closure that may qualify for special need. Again, to obtain that special need, I would highly recommend you to reach out to your economic development representative. They're there to serve you and to talk you through an application and information. And that's something that we do with our clients is we, think through a project, see what's eligible, and then we always have a meeting with the economic development representatives to talk through that project, and they can give feedback of if they think it's competitive for funding and not. Another requirement of EDA funding is to have a comprehensive economic development strategy, or a CEDS, for your region. So the EDDs, or economic development districts, are provided with funding from EDA to create a CEDS every 5 years, and they keep it updated. So any region that is covered by an economic development district would be covered by a CEDS. So for example, the entire state of Texas is covered by economic development districts. So no matter where you are located in Texas, there is a CEDS that has been approved by EDA. So you don't have to really go searching too far for that. Another example is Ohio Wood County. I was just use that as an example. They are not covered by an economic development district. So they would either need to apply for non-construction funding to create a economic development strategy, or if a regional planning commission that's not an EDD has created one in the past. For example, a university that I went to created a Toledo region CEDS that does cover Wood County, so that would be eligible because it was funded by EDA. When you are looking to submit your application, a letter of support from your economic development district is really a good measure to show that your project is supported by the CEDS, and there's regional collaboration, and you're using that CEDS as a tool and not letting it just sit on a shelf, right? You're seeing what those priority projects are, what the goals for your community are, and that's really helpful if you have a good relationship with your economic development district. Another thing that is required for EDA funding is the alignment with their investment priorities. These are all 7 of the EDA investment priorities. They were changed in 2021, I believe. So EDA is really focused on advancing equity, technology-based economic development, recovery and resiliency, environmentally sustainable development, workforce development, exports and FDI, and manufacturing. So, you really want to find investment priorities that support your project, right? So, having a sentence in your application, 7 sentences that cover each of these investment priorities doesn't really speak to how that project is really improving your community based on the investment priorities. It's a stronger application if it can hit on 3 to 4, 2 to 3, more than one of these priorities, and really go more in depth on 2 or 3 of them than trying to hit all 7 in one application. So that's just a little tip I can give. You may be thinking, well, what does EDA fund, right? Because there's tons of options. So I just wanted to give some recent EDA projects that were funded. There's some non-construction and construction projects. There's a variety of funding amounts. So as you can see, non-construction usually tends to be a lower amount of funding because there's no engineering and actual construction cost of those building materials in. And these are all EDA funds. So, imagine that the city of Eden put up a 50-50 match. That would be a total project cost of $3 million. So just looking at these numbers, you can see that projects can, be larger and, can get up to, I would say the highest I've really seen is $5 million EDA funding, matched with the 50% would be a $10 million project. I would say that's pretty unnormal. I would say of course I'm not an EDA representative anymore, but in my experience, we've submitted projects for $1.7 million in EDA funds and with a 50% match. In the recent years, they haven't really gone above $3 million, as you can see here, in funding, just because the more projects submitted, the less funding they have to give, right? So if 100 projects are submitted, they tend to want to award multiple projects rather than just one big funding. That's just kind of part of that equity lens that EDA has, is wanting to spread out the dollars a bit more. And then I want to talk a bit about how GrantWorks can help. And if you're looking to apply for EDA funding, or if you really want to just figure out, hey, we've had this project that we don't know if it is even eligible, or I want help looking at Stats America to see if I'm eligible. And that's something that we do, and we don't charge for that. It's just a Teams meeting with me of looking at your project, seeing if it is something that EDA would likely fund, making sure that you're eligible, kind of going through a checklist to make sure that this is a project that's viable. We never want to apply for a project that has no chance of funding, that's not really beneficial for the community or for us. So we really want to have that eligibility consultation first, so we can talk through of the steps it takes. Do you have your match funding? Who are you able to get letters of support from? Have you filled out an EDA application before? Are you familiar with the specific ED forms? And now we're seeing a bit more of, how do I figure out what edge is, since folks aren't as familiar with this new system as grants.gov. And then after eligibility consultation, we look at a procurement for the grant administration or grant writing, or both. We go through federal procurement rules as well as local and state. So we want to make sure that procurement is holding up standard to federal, state, and local regulations and rules, and we skim through the procurement to make sure that is all hitting all of those regulations in the community and federally. So we'll review your procurement document for you. And then we get into the application writing. We have, constant meetings with our clients talking about, hey, can you get us a copy of, your SED, so we can review exactly what those priority projects are, what your 5-year plan looks like for your community, working through letters of support, providing templates of those letters of support. start, all the way through submission of application. We will sit there on a Zoom call or a Teams call and make sure that when you apply for your application, you are, clicking the right buttons, submitting everything correctly, and making sure that you are the one signing off on those documents, right? We don't apply for you, we walk through that process with you. And you also get a dedicated economic development staff member to work with you the entire application. And then once your application is awarded, we like to stay positive and hope that all applications are awarded. We do offer the grant administration as well to, ensure that from day one that you're using funds, up to EDA's CFR 200 requirements, and providing technical assistance on how to do procurements, and filling out the rigorous EDA checklist that they have for construction projects. So we're there to sit with you, walk through every step of the way, to really help you, make sure that you're managing your federal funds appropriately, because, there are some serious consequences if you don't manage federal funds appropriately. You could have to pay back that funding if you use your funds for something like alcohol purchase. That's not allowable under EDA rules, really any federal funding. Or you could, if something crazy happens, you could be debarred from receiving federal funds in the future. So we just like to, provide that technical assistance, be your almost like an extension of staff. We're there to meet with you and sit down with you, as well as, providing that rigorous administration and making sure that we're hitting on all those reporting requirements. Then our grant management approaches, I kind of talked about it a bit. So, we provide technical assistance throughout the project life cycle. It's not just, you get 3 calls throughout your grant, it's unlimited. There's no, number associated with it. We are your partner, and we want to be here for you. You get a, dedicated economic development team. We also have a grant management portal system with a metric reporting dashboard. Again, that's no additional cost. There's no additional, sign on for that or anything like that. This is all your grant management budget is all built in the grant. So it's not like you have to come up with additional match funds or additional funds outside of your project. So it's all built into the grant. Again, we are making sure that if you have any subawardees, that we monitor those and ensure to CFR 200 is compliant. We do, GPRA reporting, that's Government Reporting and Results Act. SF 425, that's your semi-annual financial reporting. There's a lot of reportings that come along with federal funding. So we make sure that we have this checklist ready, and none of your reports are ever late. We walk you through the disbursements, any budget amendments you may need. And then we see the program through closeout and make sure that, all of your documentation is organized and audit ready. Most entities do have to go through an audit if you get a certain amount of federal funding. So we just want to ensure that if you do get audited, that it's ready and you have all those documents organized, electronically and ready for any audits. So I know I went through this pretty quickly. I just wanted to make sure that there's time for question and answer. And, if I didn't cover anything, please feel free to ask. I did see a lot of questions come through on the side. So I want to make sure that we can address those as well. And then I just did want to provide my contact information here. I'll leave this screen up while we go through question and answer to give you a chance to write down my phone number or my email. Feel free to give me a call and email. If you have a question, if you're interested in a consultation to see if your community is even eligible for EDA funding. Again, like I said, there's no charge for that. We want to be there and then help communities out. So feel free to give me a call or email anytime, and we'll kind of work through these questions here. I'm excited. All right. So one of the open-ended questions that I wanted to know from you all is, what is that biggest barrier that you have to federal funding? What kind of scares you the most about going after a grant? I know I've heard from a lot of communities is like a grant would be great, right? Who doesn't love to have that supporting funding, but we're nervous because XYZ. So if you could type that in the chat, I definitely would love to see that, and we'll kind of go through the questions.
All right. Yeah, we have quite a few here. So thank you, everyone. One of the questions that was asked is there a concern about balancing a company's commitment of jobs and a company not starting their project until the final EDA grant approval for the public works project?
Yeah, so EDA has a form called an ED 900B. It's a beneficiary form. It's a non-binding form, but it's a form that you can give companies that, you know, the company CEO will sign off and say, you know, we are looking to invest in, you know, XY area that's being funded for EDA, or that is being applied for EDA funding, and we're going to provide $2.4 million of private investment and create 30 new jobs and retain 10. So there's a, you know, a document that lays all of that out for you. It's non-binding. So if, you know, a lot of companies, you know, do see that if you do get a grant, you know, that's more promising, but in terms of like holding them to your project, I don't think there's, you know, any binding thing that you can hold a company to if they decide not to invest there.
Thanks, Renee. All right, another question from Julie is, so if we were granted an EDA grant and used your services, is that included in the grant with no additional costs?
Yeah, so for construction projects, there's a line item for administration that you get approved when you get your EDA grant. So yes, whatever administration services have been approved, you know, we would have to obviously take a look at that and you know, be able to work with you on the administration. Oftentimes we do work with clients through the application process. So in the procurement stages, we do a combined application and administrative contract. So you know, we have an application fee because EDA funds are so competitive that, you know, we're committed to that as well. And we often include a percentage of the grant, the total project cost, as our services that's built in the project. So we use what's in the approved budget, if that makes sense. I hope that answered a bit, Julie.
Yeah, and if you needed to ask a follow-up question, Julie, just feel free to add it in the chat. In the meantime, Dennis, oh, Julie said yes, thank you, perfect. Okay, Dennis asked, I've been told there are some small rural towns that have accessed EDA for retail development projects on the logic that retail growth meets the broader economic development goals. If this is true, can you give us an example?
Yeah, so the funny thing is, you know, the 6 EDA regional offices, they all have a regional director, and they all kind of run, you know, their investment review committee. That's, you know, the committee that goes through to get funding a bit differently. So the Denver regional office has funded tourism and outdoor recreation projects before, you know, prior to ARPA and CARES Act funding, and other regions have never touched them before. So it really does depend on your region, and that's, you know, another reason to get with your economic development representative and talk with them about what they can and can't fund. I personally do not have any examples from the Chicago regional office from the time I was at EDA that invested in downtown development for you know, small communities. I would also take a look at your SEDS and see if that's a goal within the SEDS. Is that downtown revitalization for retail development? I wouldn't say that it cannot be funded. I would just say that warrants an additional conversation, either with our team first and then the EDR, or the EDR first. But we, you know, because we have a strong network with EDA, we do encourage folks to at least have a consultation with us and really get all of that information ready for the EDR. Because we kind of do like a PowerPoint, a slideshow with them, and try to have all those anticipated questions about the project answered going into the meeting, so they can have a strong investment and buy-in to the project when we meet, so they can really be engaged in that project and kind of go to bat for those projects at those investment communities. And they are in the Denver region. I wish I had specific examples in the Denver region. I don't, unfortunately, but I would not be surprised, as they can, Denver has been investing in kind of the non-traditional economic development projects even prior to COVID.
Yeah, and that makes sense, Renee. I mean, you obviously work nationally, and then your EDA experience was in Chicago specifically. So obviously your team does have regional representatives and exposure. So Dennis, if it was something where you did want specific examples, I would recommend emailing Renee, because she's going to put her information in the chat, and then that way she can talk to her team and get back to you.
Exactly. Yeah, I can do that research for you as well, and just kind of see what Denver has invested in. And perfect, we already got an email. All right.
Dennis is on top of it. He already emailed you.
That's awesome.
Perfect. All right. We do have a couple more here. I think we do have some time. So this is a really big one people struggle with, is how do you prioritize your community's needs? How do you decide which project to go after first?
Yeah, I always like to tell people when they have a list of projects that they're looking at, it's better to select the project that the community really needs, rather than trying to fit a project into a certain funding bucket. So, if you have a project that your community really needs and it's not eligible for EDA funding, well, we might be able to find a different type of funding that it would be eligible for. Maybe it's USDA rural funding or CDBG funding, something like that. So, that's kind of I guess it's a 2-answer question. And then really, how do you narrow down that list of projects that you have? I feel like this is an easy answer, right? Talking to your community and seeing where those needs are. What projects are you going to see the most impact for in your community? Because those are all answers that you're going to have to supply in an application. How does this benefit your community? Where is that distress coming from? And you really want to connect your project to the community. Why is this important? Why should we be investing in your region? Why should we be giving funds to support this project? Or, what is that really doing for your community? Is it an industrial park that allows your community to work in your region, rather than commuting outside your region or your county or your city to, further their employment? Those are some impacts to really look at when you want to figure out your next project. And those are all, kind of questions that we answer in our initial consultation as well.
Yeah, it sounds like, Renee, you're saying the same thing that we really harp on at Golden Shovel, and that's the importance of telling your story and really helping to paint that picture. The combination of data and then the personal interest is so important when you're trying to compete for anything, whether that's grant funding or, wanting to get a site selector to come to your community instead of somewhere else, or even trying to recruit workforce. That story is very critical.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that is I've seen some, we oftentimes attend, IEDC conferences and regional economic development conferences, and oftentimes you see those big project awards. You got a new company to relocate to your area, and a lot, I would say, over 50% of the time, there's an EDA award connected to that. So I think on the site selector side, they also see that you're invested in this project. You've secured funding, you've made those partnerships in the region, that, it looks attractive to those companies.
Yeah, and that actually ties into the next question, which is, do you have any other tips for how to make a grant application competitive, other than what you've already shared?
Oh boy, I'm sure I have lots and lots of tips. It just, it really depends on the project. Again, like, I can give you a tip and trip for a non-construction or a construction project. It really depends on your project and what you're looking to, secure funding for. I guess just a general tip I would give is, more match is better, right? Of course, if you're eligible for 80% federal funding and you can match it with 25%, and go down a bit from 80% federal to 75% federal and 25 match. It shows your financial commitment to that project. It shows the sustainability of that project. Things I've heard in conversations of, should we fund this project or not? Is this project feasible and is it sustainable? They want to really see, is this project going to work out, or are we just going to have to close it out after we spend $10,000 and we don't have, it's not sustainable for that community. EDA really wants to see projects that, advance regional collaboration, align with their investment priorities, and are going to be completed.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's why sometimes it helps to speak with a third party that can ask those hard questions that maybe you haven't thought through how to answer yourself. So thank you, Renee. And then the last one, and this actually ties into something we want to talk about at Golden Shovel, is, what if you aren't eligible for an EDA project? I'm going to let Renee answer, but I also want to let people know that obviously there are more funding sources than the EDA, and Golden Shovel created a white paper. This is free for you to download, that talks about a lot of different funding opportunities that are available right now. And we do have someone on our team that can help to walk you through those and even some of the application processes. We don't do anything with EDA, which is why we partner with GrantWorks to take care of that for you. So please download that as well, just so that you have exposure to the vast number of resources available today. And then Renee, what do you suggest if they don't qualify for an EDA opportunity?
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you. That white pages is a great resource, and definitely check that out. But at GrantWorks as well, I'm the head of our economic development department. That's why I'm here talking about EDA, but GrantWorks as a whole does administration for almost any kind of funding that you can think of. And we have people all across the country who've dealt with, small business administration, HUD. We're actually a HUD technical advisor listed on our website. So we've worked a lot with CDBG, MITMOD, CDBG DR, that's mitigation and disaster recovery. We worked with FEMA, we've worked with state as well. So if you have a economic development grant that the state is funding and you want help with that application, we can do that as well. Like, we're not just limited to the EDA funding. Of course, that's where the larger amount of funding is usually from, but lots and lots of states out there have great resources of economic development and beyond grant programs. So I would, suggest, if it's not an EDA eligible grant, then look at your state economic development agency. Look at other federal agencies like USDA that may offer economic development grants, the ARC, DRA, that's Appalachian Regional Commission, and Delta Regional Authority as well. Lots of federal agencies look at, have different grants, and they, of course you have to fit in their footprint as well, but that's what we're here for as well. This, our grant consultations aren't, you have to have a project and ready to apply and talk to us. Like, we're here to sit with you and see, you have a priority project, where does that fit in? Is this, we can bring in experts from our environmental team who do environmental reviews to look at your mapping. We have Davis-Bacon experts to think about, the administration of Davis-Bacon requirements after you get awarded. We have, CDBG folks. So, I can get you in touch with almost anyone who does, grant applications, and we'll partner with Golden Shovel to continue to work with them and see what they can do to help you, or, what we can provide for them, and, and assist all of the existing clients with you as well.
In other words, we want to help you succeed. That's what this is all about. That's why we're here today. We know that obviously there's a lot of money out there. If we can help you to access it, then your communities will be even stronger. So thank you, Renee, so much for your presentation today. And thank you everyone for attending. Just as a reminder, Renee's contact information is up on the screen. Please do reach out to her with additional questions or to schedule that free consultation appointment. And please download our free white paper. As always, Golden Shovel is here for you. So if you need anything, reach out.